recorded now?
Yes.
Okay.
Recording in progress.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks for agreeing to join our meeting tonight. This is a special meeting of the Tree Commission, and I just want to give a quick introduction. We've requested this meeting because in the course of fulfilling our duties in holding hearings over city decisions regarding trees, we've observed recurring problems with communication and compliance. And we believe these problems need to be addressed. So we would like to outline some of these issues and hope to improve the process, which we think will result in happier residents and fewer complaints and greater appreciation for the tree ordinance. So I'm going to turn this over to Commissioner Bart Schard now, who will enlarge on these issues.
Thank you so much, Carol, and good evening, everyone. My name is Bart Schard, and I just was hoping to walk through some of the issues that the Tree Commission has identified quickly, and then hopefully open a discussion. So the Commission views this meeting as an opportunity to kind of start a dialogue on some of the issues that we've identified through the hearing process and the compliance process with Tree Commission decisions. So we're hoping to discuss these areas for kind of two main reasons. One is to learn kind of the mayor's and the council's approach to the issues that we identify. And two, if we all agree that there are issues that need to be addressed, to begin a process wherein we can cooperate and coordinate to address those issues. We appreciate your attention to these areas for improvement. And the Commission takes our responsibilities seriously, and we hope here today to only take steps to better carry out those duties and to further the city's commitment to the urban forest. And we think that with certain changes, the process could be improved, and like Carol said, residents, appellants, and appellees will be happier with the process. The Tree Commission has identified three main areas for improvement with the hearing process. One is compliance, that is, parties' compliance with Tree Commission decisions. Two is city commission information sharing. And the third is the integrity of the hearing process, that is, the integrity of Tree Commission hearings. So I'll start first with post-decision compliance. The Commission has observed that there is a lack of a clear process for compliance and enforcement after our decisions. It's unclear to the Commission what steps are taken to ensure that the parties before the Commission actually comply with the Commission's orders and uphold their commitments that they make during hearings. So, for example, in a recent case, which I believe was provided to all attendees, the case name is TC 2020-01, the Montgomery College case. In that case, the college testified that in addition to replacing the removed trees, it would also plant 40 additional trees, 96 of which would be a larger diameter than required. So that's a pretty simple commitment that was made under oath. At no point after that decision was issued was the Commission informed that a compliance check took place. It very well might have, but the Commission wasn't informed, or that the college completed the tree planting commitment that it made under oath before the Tree Commission. Similarly, in another case, TC 2020-02, Berger Properties, the applicant testified that it would continue to work with both the city and the appellants, that is the neighbors around the property in question, to implement a plan that resulted in improvement of stormwater runoff or to address the issues that the neighbors had brought up regarding the trees that would be removed. And similarly, at no point was the commission informed that a compliance check took place or that the applicant actually complied with its testimony under oath to coordinate with the neighbors on that issue. So it seems to us that the commission lacks statutory authority at this point to ensure compliance through any means post-decision. And so that's one issue that we've identified. The next is city and commission communication. The commission has observed a lack of communication. For example, as stated above, there is no mechanism through which post-decision, the commission is informed of the events that take place between the applicant or the appellee and the city. And this information is critical for us to do our job, right? After we issue decisions, unless there's compliance and communication to make sure that compliance takes place, our decisions could basically be useless. So it's the process, the communication is necessary for us to take remedial steps as necessary or to ensure compliance with the orders. And then the last piece that we wanted to talk about tonight is the integrity of our hearing process, the Tree Commission's hearing process. The commission has observed that there's a lack of ability to ensure that the parties who appear before the commission are candid and truthful in their remarks and their commitments before the Tree Commission. We have observed that under oath, parties have made misstatements or possibly perjured themselves, essentially not held up to their commitments or facts that they stated during hearings. An example is one that I already cited, a case TC 2020-02, Berger Properties, which I mentioned, wherein the applicant testified that it would continue to work with the city and the appellants to implement a plan that result in improvements in stormwater on the appellee's property. The commission later learned in that case that that Berger Properties, the applicant, did not actually follow through with its commitment, which it made under oath before the Tree Commission, and which the Tree Commission took into account in its decision. So there is no mechanism through which the commission can address the candor before hearings or to ensure its compliance with the orders. Now, we bring these areas of improvement to your attention, not to seek, kind of a wholesale overhaul of the hearing process, but solely to improve the workings of the commission to carry out our charge under the code. In our view, should the mayor and the city council decide that the issues of enforcement, compliance, and the integrity of the hearing process are not in need of any changes, it could hurt the commission's effectiveness. And as a side note, the recruitment efforts that the council has undertaken, I think, will be hurt as well. Again, we take our responsibilities seriously, but we do believe that if certain changes aren't made, it will undercut our efforts to protect the urban forest as stated in the code, and to ensure that your constituents, that our neighbors actually feel that they have a true hearing and a true process through which they can address their very serious concerns. And so if not addressed, we believe that inaction could harm residents and belittle the efforts that the council has decided this commission is supposed to take part in, which is making sure our residents have a fair hearing and that the Tree Commission can actually take the steps that the council has instructed it to do. So that's a brief overview. I'm not sure if my fellow commissioners have anything to add. And if not, of course, we can open discussion and talk about these issue areas.
Yes, so yeah, does Nancy or Jim have any comments that they want to add?
Not at this moment. If there's some questions,
directed to us. Maybe at that time, that'll be appropriate. But Bart, thank you very much. I think the one thing that I would say is that it has created a frustration among members of the commission and a question of the seriousness of these hearings, particularly if the recommendations that we have made are not implemented or taken seriously. And it does, let me just say, it does adversely affect the residents that we're trying to serve.
Yeah, Bart, great job. I would just add that there was no question of the urban forest manager's decision on the trees. This was not a question of the tree permit or whether or not to remove trees. It was not a question of the development or whether or not that should go forward. It was really a question of engaging neighbors and their concerns about stormwater management, and really a question of neighborhood process. And so the tree commission did its best to sort of thread a needle and consider the comments made under oath and chart a path forward so that neighbors' concerns were heard and the development could proceed. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Carol.
Yeah, and yeah, thanks very much, Bart. That was a great summary. Yeah, I mean, it really seems to come down to a general issue of communication. Communication between the developers and communication between the city and its residents, and communication within departments. Sometimes we've been in the situation, I think the TC 2020-02 was a good example where residents came to us, the tree commission, when they really had other issues with the city. The appellants had a serious water drainage problem. They were showing videos of, these New Orleans style floods coming into their backyard. So they already had water issues. And then they were faced with the prospect of removal of a lot of trees in the process of the development. And so they basically they were using the tree ordinance to try to address this, and which, I think is legitimate, but it also kind of muddies the waters and does raise the question of whether the tree commission should be dealing with these specific issues. So I think it would have been very helpful if there had been more communication with the city regarding the water issues. And particularly once the development started, if there was more communication between the developers and the residents. So my view is that it really comes down to communication, trying to figure out ways of improving that. So,
If I may interrupt.
yes, no, please, no, I'm done. So please.
In that particular case, what was particularly alarming was that the city already knew about the intrusion of the water because they had already tried to do some remedies there.
Right.
So it wasn't that they were unknowing when this developer began requesting permits from the city. So it raises a question of who's keeping the historical record in order to inform new employees to keep senior employees up to date with what's been happening with our residents when there is kind of an insult to injury.
Yeah, and in all fairness, both these cases occurred during the process of transitioning urban forest managers. So that was certainly certainly caused more problems. And but on the other hand, I don't want to put this all on the urban forest manager. I mean, I think it's we can't just point the finger at him.
I wasn't, that was not my
Well,
intent, but
no,
it's,
I know.
but-
No. I would. That was not directed towards you, Nancy. But I just wanted to emphasize that.
And Carol, if I can just say one,
complicated things.
Carol, if you
Yes,
don't
sir.
mind, if I could say one more thing before we open up the discussion. No, I don't think any of the, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think any of the commissioners hope to convene this meeting to discuss the facts of any one particular case or what happened or didn't happen. I think what we're hoping to get out of this meeting is to, one, explain these issues and to make sure that the council and the mayor is aware of them, but also to highlight areas where the tree commission is hamstrung. And to the extent the city and the council want to make sure that the tree commission can actually carry out its charge, the areas of compliance, the integrity of the hearing process, and kind of a delineated mechanism for communication of post-decision events are the three main areas that we were hoping to discuss.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you totally, Bart. Yeah, I think we can open the discussion up. If others have comments, questions.
Do you want us to raise our hand, Carol? What's the easiest way to do that for you?
Sure.
Or we can just go. We're not a big crew.
go for it.
Great. Thanks. Thank you, first of all, for laying out so clearly the different components you're looking at. At this point, are there things that, any solutions or recommendations that the commission has to addressing any of these issues?
Yeah, Carol, you mind if I?
Go ahead. Yes, please do.
Thank you. I think, we could kind of informally have a conversation today about potential fixes. But what might be more useful for you all is kind of working in a coordinated fashion to develop those fixes. The commission has talked, in deliberations about, what the best way to address these issues are, whether that's some type of enforcement mechanism for the commission itself to have in post-decision considerations, or a kind of set forth process through which the city reports back to the commission after a decision, or sanctions or other types of mechanisms through which the commission can ensure that parties comply with what either statements made under oath or orders kind of that the commission makes. I mean, the issue is, just to beat a dead horse, that post-decision it's kind of out of the commission's hand. We don't know what happens. And so I think what would be best, what we're hoping to start with this meeting is a conversation about what the best remedies would be that the mayor and the council sees fit.
Mhm. Thank you, Barton. And I appreciate how you frame that. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have so many city staff on the call this evening, and our city attorney as well, to listen to this and to figure out a best course moving forward. I do think it's going to take some follow-up conversations with staff in the city attorney's office to look at some of the mechanisms we can take moving forward.
You don't have any
Yes.
questions of us?
Peter and Daryl just raised their hands.
Yes. Yeah. Daryl, go ahead.
let Peter go.
All
I just,
right.
Peter says me. There's just a couple of things. I remain a little bit confused about the reference to the college as an area where there was communication or enforcement or a compliance issue. Correct me if I'm wrong, Marty, but they're still in the midst of construction, so their tree replanting would not take place until 6 months after construction is completed. So I'm not sure what the commission was intending with identifying that case as one in which there seems to be a breach of something, because we're not aware of it. The college did pay a significant payment to the city for their fee in lieu, and is, as you said, on record and committed to replanting. They just will do so 6 months post construction. So I was hoping we could determine if there was something else on that particular case that you were trying to get us to recognize, because I'm just not aware of an issue where that particular case reflects these concerns that you had.
Yeah, and thank you, Daryl. That's a great addition. I think that that's a perfect example. Everything that you just mentioned regarding the 6 months and where construction is, that's all information that the Tree Commission is not aware of. And we learned that today. So I think that it's a good example of those types of updates or that type of process to relay that type of information would be really useful, right? In the process. I don't think, and if my remarks said that, I apologize. I don't think that the commission is trying to identify any breaches of protocol. I think what we're identifying is a lack of protocol. And so a kind of, for example, a mechanism to fix this would be a line of communication or a procedure through which the commission was updated on the status of projects and when certain commitments were meant to take place.
Yeah, I think that is language in the permit itself. So if you all haven't seen that permit, that could certainly be something that we could share. I'll hold off any other comments to give the council time to ask questions.
Yeah, Peter, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thanks for presenting the information. And I do want to say, as Daryl did, that the demolition hasn't even, well, I guess the demolition is now done, but they're still working on the foundation at Montgomery College. I take the point, though, that you don't have any way of knowing that. I guess what I'm curious about is legally, when things are said by the participants in the party that they agree to do or otherwise make statements, is there an existing process by which, if they don't do that, they can be sanctioned? I mean, we call them quasi-judicial, and I understand that they can eventually go to court in some cases, but maybe one of the lawyers could just explain, if somebody says, I will do this, or if the permit says you must do this, and they don't, what happens, which is separate from, can these trees be cut down? That's been approved, and I think we all sort of understand that it's other stipulations or requirements. I just don't have a sense myself for how that works. So maybe, Skip wanted to weigh in on that.
Yes.
Is that okay? Thank you. So generally speaking, council member, the enforcement mechanisms for tree commission decisions are found in section 12.12.130. And like almost every other provision of city code, a violation of a tree commission decision or parts of that chapter are enforceable by a municipal infraction up to $1,000 fine. In this particular instance, that's the maximum amount of fine. And there are certain actions which can rise to the level of misdemeanor. So there is an enforcement mechanism in place. As part of the municipal infraction process, in addition to the fine, the city could go before the court and ask, and likely would ask, for an order to abate from the judge. In order to abate would then have the effect of a court order to comply with whatever the court decides it's willing to order, which in this particular circumstance, the city would ask for whatever the enforcement mechanism is that's necessary to enforce the aspect of the decision that needs to be enforced.
Yep, I have a question regarding that. Is there a time frame, kind of like a statute of limitations, by which that infraction has to, or that non-compliance has to be brought to the attention of the city or to the commission?
So the commission is not an enforcement body. The commission is a quasi judicial body. The enforcement arm of the decision would come from the city staff. So, but to answer the specific aspect of your question, typically a municipal infraction needs to be issued typically within 1 year of the violation. That's the general rule of thumb. There are, like everything else in the law, there are always exceptions, but that's the general rule.
I could ask a follow-up question on that. The enforcement mechanism piece that you highlighted makes sense, and I'm wondering if it's the city's position that extends to commitments made or issues with false testimony under oath.
Well, so first of all, the tree commission is part of the city. So the city doesn't have a position that's separate and apart from the tree commission's position. And nor does the tree commission have a position that's separate and apart from the city's position. Having said that, you ask a question that there's a gray area. I'm not sure that it's addressed specifically in the provisions of the code that relate to the tree commission itself. Whether it is somewhere else in the code related to testimony before a city board commission or whatever, I don't know. Again, as an attorney, you know that perjury, which is essentially what you're alleging occurred in this particular circumstance, is a very difficult thing to prove because you have to show that it's knowing and willful. Yeah. There are other ways to address that issue without going to that particular issue.
And what would those be?
Well, is it more important to address the issue of perjury or more important to address the issue of compliance? In this particular circumstance, I think you can get to where you want to go, or in a particular circumstance. And let me back up and say, nobody likes to be lied to. Nobody likes to be lied to when the person is supposedly under oath. We've all seen it if you've been in a proceeding, a judicial proceeding, a quasi-judicial proceeding. It's a bad thing for any number of reasons. So I understand the frustration with respect to that. But what is the most useful approach? And that kind of depends on the circumstance. Without getting into specifics, I would generally say the most useful approach is to address the issue that you're actually trying to solve.
I just had one other follow-up question. So if the permit says you must plant so many additional trees as a condition of being given the permit to cut down this other tree, and I assume that's in the permit itself, then that would fall in the category that Mr. Kornberg, you were just talking about, which is to say that the staff can enforce that if it isn't done. But if somebody says something else that's sort of relevant, I guess that's the question. If they say, well, we've had an arborist working on this for the last several years. Is that just sort of irrelevant if it turns out that that's not true? It sounds like that's kind of examples of what the people are asking about. Or is the point just that doesn't matter as long as they comply with the conditions for the permit? Well,
Again, it'd be easier to address in a specific context, which you can't do in this forum. So I understand the dilemma you're having asking the question, and I appreciate the understanding, reciprocal understanding I have in answering the question. But again, when you have an adversarial proceeding, and you have attorneys involved and you have parties that are trying to achieve an end, the typical course of action on both sides is for parties to move in one direction or another if they think it's going to achieve their ends. Again, there's no excuse for dishonesty, lacking integrity in how you present your argument and all that, those other things. But that is unfortunately what happens in the process, the judicial process and the quasi-judicial process. And the goal of the Tree Commission or any quasi-judicial body should be to try and fashion a resolution to the problem with which they're confronted to hold both sides accountable to the best of their ability. Is it always going to be perfect? No, it's not always going to be perfect. Is it always going to be possible to be enforced? No, it is not always going to be possible to be enforced. And that is true across the board in every judicial proceeding in the United States of America. Does it work most of the time? Yeah, it does. But that's the reality of the situation.
I guess our basic point, though, is that we really don't have any means of ensuring compliance for anyone. You know, once we have made the decision, we really are done with that process. And so I guess the question is, do we want to operate that way? I'm not saying that the Tree Commission should be given enforcement powers. Because I honestly don't know how that would work. And I think we really are just trying to propose or suggest that we need means of following up on these decisions to make sure that people really are doing what they say they are going to do. And, you know, I hate to have to go back to this one particular case, but the situation was that the developer was saying, well, you know, we're going to communicate with, we're going to work with the appellants and help, you know, basically follow the process that we promised to do. But then they did not do that. And, you know, it's not a matter of punishing them, but just how do we ensure that, particularly in the case of a development, which doesn't impact a lot of neighbors, how do we go about ensuring that there is communication among the neighbors who are affected and the developers? I mean, that's really the point we're trying to make.
Sorry, if I could just jump in. So Carol, if I'm hearing you correctly, and I don't know, Daryl, and I know Casey and Cindy have their hands up as well, if you can speak to this, is there a mechanism in which we could put in that after the Tree Commission has makes a decision, and I'll just use, for example, the Montgomery College, because I think that's a slightly easier one to pinpoint, and it says, 6 months after construction, X number of trees of X size will be planted. Is there a way to have some kind of ticker in the public works that a message gets sent to the Tree Commission, or at its next meeting, an update is provided, so that they're kept in the loop on those things?
I think that would be very helpful, and I think that's one of the things we've considered. But I should let Casey and then Cindy and then Peter comment.
Thanks, Cindy. You are actually in front of me, so I will. You go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of lost track. I was gonna follow up something similar to what Kate said. So we have. Thank you, by the way, for outlining it so clearly what you see the issues are that we need to deal with. So we have a new city attorney, we have a new urban forest manager, we have 2 very complex cases. We have a transition also in the actual tree ordinance. So some of this is, I guess my question for the old timers is, have you seen these before? Or is this new because these are complex cases? And I think some of it does have a pretty straightforward solution. So developing a process where you get informed about tree decisions, you get a copy of the permit, et cetera. Those things sound, I'm speaking for the public works folks here, and maybe that's not fair to them, but it seems like that kind of thing ought to be workable. But I'm curious if Carol and Nancy saw these things going on before with other cases. Again, these are two very complex cases, and there will be more complex cases. I'm not trying to minimize that. I'm just wondering how far back some of these go.
Well, I've been on the commission for 21 years, and I can say, yes, this is actually pretty common.
Okay.
So people will say under oath, yes, I will plant these number of trees, or I will comply with the decision, and then they don't. And it's, you know, it's difficult for the urban forest manager to follow up on every single one of these cases.
Yeah.
Because they have a full workload. And yeah, so, you know, ideally they could go back after however many months and say, okay, have you planted these trees? Are these the right size, etc. But, you know, that usually doesn't happen. And, you know, we've had people say, oh, yes, I'm going to develop this house for my own purposes. And then they'll turn around and flip it, you know, that sort of thing. So, yeah, anyway.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Yeah.
I think it's also important to differentiate between non-compliance with a permit and non-compliance with process that we have clearly stated in an opinion, and to which the participants in that hearing have agreed to and supported, which is a much more ambiguous task to follow up on. So it's important to differentiate between those two. The permit says this is what you can do, and it's very easy, but it requires on the other that the appropriate people, both within the city government and the council or whomever, and the various participants in the hearing, actually read the opinion of the commission and its request for the types of action in the future.
Yes, yeah, thanks a lot, Nancy. That's a very good point. Let's see. Casey?
I think it's
Casey here.
Great, thank you. First of all, thank you all to all of you on the Tree Commission for your service and for calling this meeting tonight. I think it's really helpful for us to have a chance to talk with you. And one of the things we've been talking about as we've been going through the revision of committees as a whole is just the connections between the council and the committees. So thank you for the opportunity to really kind of talk through things we don't always think through because we're not a part of it on a daily basis. I think what you've laid out here to me makes a lot of sense in terms of the concerns you're raising and you know, some of the suggestions we've been talking about. You know, I'm hearing that it sounds like communication is something that would be helpful and to improve that. And then the mechanisms, you know, for ensuring that there's follow through after the hearings as well. And one of the things I wanted to note is that in some of the other discussions that I've talked with people related to the noise control as well, that's been a question that has been raised in that context too, that I would be interested in exploring. So there might be some opportunities to look for some broad kind of solutions that might apply in other situations as well. And so I would be curious to see, you know, what sort of solutions we could come up with and what sort of other opportunities there might be. But I appreciate you bringing this to us, and it's clear that you're taking this very seriously and want to make sure that your work continues to be really valuable and effective in terms of the way that we treat trees in the city. So thank you very much.
And let me say, the way in which we treat our residents,
Yeah, exactly right.
because they are the ones, particularly in the one case, that, quite frankly, I hate to use, we're being recorded. They took the hard end of this. They really help me out, Bart.
So go ahead, Bart.
The neighbors had very significant concerns, and it was a tough case.
And we thought we had a solution that would bring them into a process, and it didn't happen. So yes, trees are our concern by virtue of the commission's mission, but equally respect and the integrity of how we treat our residents is, for me, equally important.
Yeah, exactly. So Bart, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just had one more thought that I should have mentioned in when I laid the issues out, but I forgot to, and I think that this speaks both to Nancy's point and to Mr. Cornbrook's point, which is that in terms of remedies for this issue with the integrity of the hearing process and someone's testimony and then compliance, one simple fix, and this is just something that I hope the mayor and the council will take under consideration, is that the tree commission is a little hamstrung in terms of what can be in the orders of the tree commission. So for instance, if in a case where an applicant agrees to do something going forward prospectively, if the tree commission were able to include that requirement in its order, it would no longer be a testimony issue, right? It would be a compliance issue. And it's my understanding, and this would be for the council and the city attorneys and the mayor to decide, but that the tree commission isn't able to do that type of forward-looking requirement in an order. But that would address some of this issue, where if a party says they're going to do something, tree commission includes it in the order. Now it's just a compliance issue, and the city can just move forward with it in that regard. So that's just something I wanted to mention in terms of possible fixes and things for you all to consider.
Yeah, thanks, Bart. That's a really helpful comment. And I have a question for the city attorneys. Would that require changes in the code to implement something, provided you actually wanted to do that?
Right. So one of the issues that you get into with that is generally, and I'm not talking tree commission, I'll talk globally in the context of these types of hearings, okay? Parties on either side will, they'll agree to something if they think it's going to get them where they need to go. But if it's not within the authority of the body to order that included in its order, it's unenforceable. Right. So even though they agreed to it, it's unenforceable by the body. And in that sense, by the city in terms of issuing a municipal infraction. Now, there may be a way potentially to alter the code to allow for something like that, any stipulations of the party or something that become part of a body's order may be enforceable, and they would have to expressly agree to that, I would assume. But because it would operate essentially outside of the body's authority and be an agreement between the parties that would be paid part of the order, if you will. So there may be a way to do that, but you could potentially run into trouble on the enforcement side of it, because you could have a judge that might say, well, this is an agreement between the parties that's separate and apart from the body's enforcement authority. So we'd have to look at that closely. But it's not as cut and dry as just because they agreed to do it, you can enforce it.
Sorry, I just had a follow-up question. Would one way to do that be to make it a condition of issuance of the permit?
Well, you run into the same problem.
Okay. So Peter has his hand up.
Yeah, so just one follow-up on that then. What's interesting is that, we've talked, for example, about wanting racial equity and climate change and so on to pervade virtually everything that we do, but we've obviously not, for example, empowering the tree commission on some of those things. We have a housing strategic plan as well. All those things are interrelated. And so to what extent does it make sense when the city has policies in those areas to want various bodies to take those things into account when they may not be specifically charged with those? And does that potentially produce outcomes that we wouldn't want to produce? As a very vague or open-ended question, I guess, but it doesn't seem fair to put a body like the Tree Commission in the position of saying you need to make rulings and decisions about an area that isn't something that is in your in the code that created the body, and isn't something that you necessarily have expertise in. On the other hand, we all sort of understand now that these different components get woven in together, because trees do relate to climate change, do relate to stormwater, does relate to sort of development. And so if the boundaries are sort of being cut across, should we find a way to try to address that? Or is it just going to be that sometimes things will come up that can't be enforceable? I don't think we really want to be in that position, because as Bart and others said, then it may give participants in the process some doubt about how the process really works. It's not exactly a question, it's just a rumination.
Nancy? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. One of my other concerns is that if our opinion, one of my challenges is knowing who's actually reading the opinions that we are making, who gets the document. And I raise that because I'm concerned that when we mention various city departments, we have no way of knowing if this report reaches those departments, so that they understand what our intentions are when we made our rulings and gave the directions contained within that report. We don't know where the report goes. And we don't know, I don't know to whom the report is given. Then we specifically mention as being involved in managing our recommendations.
Does anyone on city staff know how that process? Daryl, do you want to answer?
Sure. I've just been waiting. The tree commission order goes to the appellant and to the other party and to the city urban forest manager, and it gets recorded in the file. So everybody who is party to the hearing gets a copy of the tree commission's decision. I want to tread lightly here because I don't want to be misunderstood, but part of the same concerns that I'm hearing on the part of the tree commission, we as city staff had, in particular in relation to the order that the tree commission provided on the case on Ethan Allen. And the reason being is because in the order itself, the tree commission was giving guidance that we could not enforce nor affect. So it was basically putting us in a situation where we see this in the order, but there is no process to accommodate it. And I can totally understand the tree commission's predicament when faced with residents who are who are using the tree commission process to try to adjudicate something that's not tree related per se, but in this case, stormwater related. And there can be other cases, we've certainly had them in the past, where it's actually a neighbor to neighbor beef. And so an appellant is using the tree commission and the process just as a way to delay or harass or otherwise, kind of mess with the other party. And I know the tree commission has got to be sensitive to that, and so tries to rule on the merits of the case. But it's a real challenge when the tree commission steps outside of the tree ordinance aspects and looks into things, for instance, in this case, it was stormwater management. Currently there is no public appeal or discussion process related to stormwater permitting. It's a very administrative, regulatory driven process. So when the tree commission in its order said, you two parties need to communicate about stormwater, the city didn't have any avenue to make that happen because it is not part of the stormwater permitting process. So we couldn't do anything with that. And I wish I could think of something that was maybe a little less laden so we could see it more clearly in terms of if the tree commission is asking or stating in the order for something to be done that the city can't control or doesn't have a process for. So, I fully understand and respect the concerns of the tree commission that they felt like their order wasn't abided. But we on a staff level also felt like the tree commission stepped outside of its role by adding language in the order that was not a place where we had regulatory or administrative ability to meet. So we do not want to not follow the tree commission's order. We follow those very, very closely, and it is an integral part of the permitting process. So I share your concerns about that, and not quite sure what the answer is, particularly when you have cases that are beyond just the tree ordinance issues and really got either other environmental or neighborhood related kind of conflicts that you may be hearing.
Yeah, I agree with you, Daryl, that there have been times when the tree ordinance has been blatantly abused. So we've certainly been in those situations. But again, this case was a little less clear in that I don't think you can necessarily separate stormwater from trees. I mean, they are related.
Yes, my only point is there's a clear regulatory stormwater permit process that the city has to abide by. It's in our code, it's mandated. So we have to follow this regulatory and ordinance-based stormwater process, which doesn't include what the commission was asking the applicant to do. So we have no way to make them do that if it's not in the regulatory ordinance.
Let me provide a little clarity, because what we were asking was to just invite the residents in to hear a discussion. That's all.
Yes, and we just don't have a way to make that happen. It's not part of their permit or stormwater review or application process. There is no public meeting or other discussion.
On the other hand, it seems from a public relations point of view that it would be desirable to have some form of communication with the residents. And I guess that's basically what Nancy is saying. So maybe it doesn't have to be a formal process or part of the regulations or the code, but simply, try to get more communication between the city and the residents in cases like this.
Yeah, we just don't have an avenue to do that, particularly when there's a very clear legal and regulatory process for the stormwater piece. And as you understand, because it is so clearly defined in city code, we have to be very careful that we're not outstepping or incorrectly being perceived as the, the city engineer is who reviews those stormwater permit applications. So you can't have a partiality or a preference, or, I mean, it's very much a science-based regulatory process. So we just don't have in these cases the ability, we're not mediators, we're not public relations, we don't have an avenue where we can bring parties together to have a general conversation. There's other processes that we do where it's baked in, community meetings are baked in. But in this particular case with stormwater, there is no community meeting that's part of the process. Now, the council could decide to re-look at the stormwater ordinance and add an aspect of that, and then we'll have an avenue. But right now, we don't have an avenue given the way the stormwater ordinance is currently crafted and what we require of applicants to go through the permit process.
Okay, thank you, Daryl. Cindy has a comment to add. I'm sorry, Cindy,
We can't hear you.
unmute.
Sorry, hit the wrong button.
Yeah.
I wanted to follow up on what Daryl said just now. So for not about this particular tree commission case, but stormwater generally, if there's a technical and legal process that's outlined, and I agree, it's pretty clear and it's pretty science-based, and there isn't any official room for public input. Okay, fine. If a resident wants to come in and talk about a particular stormwater permit, I presume they would be welcome, but I think I hear you saying that the decision needs to be based on the science and technical, and unless that resident is coming in with engineering drawings and so on and so forth, it's not gonna be able to be used. Is that essentially what you're saying, according to what we have in the code now? And maybe that's a skip question.
I think my point only was that the tree commission order was asking the parties to have a meeting to discuss stormwater. And so we just don't have an avenue on the city side to require that, make that happen, facilitate that. It's just not part of the stormwater permit process.
And so I think what I'm hearing, if I could just jump the queue a bit, is I just want to make sure I'm hearing this correctly. There's the information sharing, and Daryl, I thinking about what is capable, what is feasible for your office. But it seems to me that being able to loop around again with the tree commission on, after their decision, what was, to kind of close the case, I guess, on, were the trees planted 6 months later as determined, and other things that were in the orders. And I understand there are things that are compliance that have to do with the decision, and compliance with the permits that people talked about. And maybe that can be just ongoing communications that is provided back to the commission. On the legal issues, I think we're not going to resolve those this evening. And what I think we need to do is ask our city attorney, as was expressed before, to look at the pros and cons of what would happen if we had expressed agreements part of the order, and to have more of a legal analysis done of that. And I think that would also take care of the situation that I think would take care of the situation we're talking about right here, because, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, if we're saying that the decision included that the parties needed to have a conversation about something, and that became part of the order, maybe, possibly, it could be enforceable down the road if we change something in the code, but we'd have to look at that. Right now, what I'm hearing is saying to somebody from a tree commission decision that you all need to have a conversation. There's nothing to say that conversation has to take place. There's nothing to say they even have to come back to the city and say the conversation took place. so hearing that this is frustrating, not only for members of the tree commission, but also residents who then come before the tree commission and is confusing. I think the next best step is to have our city attorney provide a legal analysis on what is feasible for us to do, what is not, and then the council and the tree commission and staff can take a look at that and think about how we can move forward.
Important to
Thanks.
look at, so the implications of that, because the report is given to the appellants, and they believe that's going to happen. But the city doesn't have a mechanism for that to happen. Then we've created more disillusionment.
Right, that's what I'm saying, that exactly. That's why we need the legal analysis from the city attorney to know what mechanisms we have and to be much clearer about that. So those are the takeaways I took in terms of next steps.
And I'm sorry, Cindy, did you have another comment? Oh, okay. And Peter?
One other thing that we ought to try to make sure is that, and maybe this will never happen, but in future orders, in future cases, while we're looking into all of this, we need to make sure that anything that falls outside the orbit or authority of the tree commission doesn't get included, and that's flagged somewhere before the final order is written, so that then they can say, okay, since we can't insist on that condition, we might adjust the other conditions that we're considering applying, so that we don't get to a point, even if later on we do decide it makes sense to broaden the authority in some fashion, so we don't get into a situation where something unenforceable is being ordered, because there's, and I don't know how to ensure that that happens, but we just need to make sure that that doesn't happen. Explicitly look at each order before it gets finalized and make sure nothing like that's going to happen.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. That's a very good point. And Cindy, you have a hand up?
Yeah, yes. I just wanted to follow up on Kate's, what I presume were summary comments. So there were your 3 points at the beginning, the communications, we've talked about that, the compliance and enforcement, and it sounds like there's two pieces. There's the things that can be enforced, and there's the legal issues about what can and cannot be enforced, which Kate talked about, and then the integrity of the hearing process. I'm not sure. I heard, I did sort of. Skip, could you please repeat the part about if somebody comes to you said generally, if someone comes to a hearing and they're saying they made a promise because they want to get a permit, and then what do you do after that? Is there any, are there any legal options to pursue along the lines of looking at some of those less enforceable items? Or
Right.
there's some options for that. Are there any options to ask you to pursue? I'm not seeing any, but are there any options to pursue there that we should ask
Right.
you to look into?
Right, Councilmember Duvall. I heard the mayor as saying that's one of those things that
Oh, okay.
you're going to be asking me to look into.
All right, thanks. I guess I wasn't completely clear about that. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, Marty, you want to add a comment?
Yeah, I thought I'd just chime in so everyone can see my face and know that I'm here. And just definitely give an endorsement of the notion of sort of formalizing communication post orders. That does seem to be sort of a big breakdown here, is the lack of confidence that the order was being enforced in sort of thoroughly and in good faith. And I very much recognize that there wasn't a process in advance for reporting back to the commission. You know, I'm sure I totally understand wanting to know where your your words and your orders go in terms of how they're enforced out in the world. And certainly makes you feel better about your work when you know and you see the results of enforcement happening. So I very much understand that, and am very sort of interested in coming up with some good solutions there. And then just I wanted to kind of summarize kind of the way I'm reading some of this. It seems like there is a question of the different components of what a commission order ends up being. It seems one component is quoted testimony or referenced testimony from someone from the proceeding. Another is sort of statements the commission might include sort of along the way in the order. And then the final is what the order itself is, which, as you read at the last section, is titled order and gives very enforceable, prescriptive sort of requirements of the of the party that's being referenced. And so it seems like there's kind of a different question about each of those. The testimony piece is a question of perjury, maybe, as was discussed earlier, and then the other two are these kind of two different versions of desires of what we'd like to see happen and understanding of the situation. In this case, I very much went to the order itself. In the case of the Ethan Allen situation, I'm looking at the order for what I'm sort of able to kind of enforce very clearly. It's certainly worth a discussion if we need to have internally a different way to kind of itemize other elements of the decision as a whole for pieces that our staff needs to follow up on, and maybe even have a mechanism for going back to the commission for getting clarity on or determining just internally in staff, what the best way, or is it possible? Maybe that's like sort of legal advice from our attorney for certain elements. I just wanted to differentiate between what's in the order and what's sort of stated elsewhere in the decision. And I totally understand, the commission's concerns with the developer maybe not following through on commitments they made. And I'm very open to discussions about, how we can use the various levers of Tacoma Park government to get the best results going forward.
Yeah, thanks very much, Marty. So any other comments from? Okay, I mean, I think we've covered the topic pretty well. We've gotten very, very good feedback from everyone involved. So I think perhaps we could, perhaps City Council could chew over some of these questions, and maybe we could agree to meet again.
Sure. I think the next step is getting the legal advice from the city attorney. I think
Right.
Marty has committed to putting in place a process. I think that, not to put words in your mouth, Marty, but I heard that as a promise to put in place a good process to get back to you all on information. So I think that piece will move forward. I think we just need to get the legal advice from the city attorney to be able then to move forward on that. And so we'll work with the city attorney. There are a number of things right now on his docket. Just to be clear, we still are dealing with COVID. We have ARPA funding and other things that his office is working on at the moment. But we can connect with the city attorney and get a timing on that.
Okay, that sounds very good. Okay, well, I just want to thank everybody for coming and providing such, useful, stimulating, helpful comments. And I hope to meet again soon, or sooner or later.
Yeah. in person, hopefully.
Yes, perhaps in person.
Thank you, Carol.
Okay, well, take care, everyone. Okay,
All right.
all
Thanks,
right.
Carol.
Thank
Good
you.
job.
Good night, all.